can do that. Yeah.
Okay, Dennis, if you allow me. So first of all, I'd like to thank you, Dennis, for being here with us. It's very, very special. So for everyone who's here, does anyone, في حدا ما بيحكي إنجليزي أو ما بيفهم شوي بعض الإنجليزي فينا نترجم شوي? Is there anyone who doesn't understand English? I'm saying it in Arabic, Dennis.
Okay.
So if there is something, what I can do if you want is I can hop on chat and add some notes in Arabic if need be, if I felt that the issue is a bit more sophisticated. I mean, the register is higher than what they probably can.
There's already someone writing in the chat that they don't understand English, but it's also fine. معلش لأنه كمان حيكون في صور.
Exactly.
حيكون في خلط بين الإنجليزي وشوية عربي و PowerPoint شاركنا فيها Dennis. So some of you know me. I'll just mention that Dennis was a distinct professor of mine at university, and from the many years of learning that I got from just 2 months or 3 months of being with him, I felt like there's value to be shared by Dennis with all of us. فدينيس كان أستاذي بالجامعة وعطى يعني زخم من المعرفة اللي ضلت معي لفوق 20 سنة، فحبيت إنه شارككم ببعض هالشي. Also, Denis is, beside being an architect and designer, and he's a human being who's been able to integrate our humanity in design. And that's something very rare in the design world today. So maybe we'll start, Denis, if you could, before speaking about the design and architecture specifically, maybe mention a few milestones in your life that can give them an idea of what type of life you led, and even the geographies that you were in. And many of the people who are part of this talk today are in different locations as well. So maybe some of them can also share where they are based right now, for you to get a sense of this group as well.
Thank you, Jemima. I'd first like to introduce my wife, who's sitting next to me. This is Kate.
Kate.
Are you on there?
I'm here.
Yeah. Gorgeous.
Kate's a professor at Temple. And I'm retired now. But I am putting together a book based on my experiences with teaching students about beginning design. It's been quite a challenge to do that. Students entering architecture, if you will remember, it's a big mystery. And so I tried to involve students by putting them in environments where they experience what they're doing, not just observe what they're doing. And that experience is always personal for each student. About geography, I was born in South Africa and graduated with architecture in Cape Town. And then I went to graduate school in the United States and eventually immigrated. And I've been teaching here and also taught in Rome, Italy for many years. So I started to think about the environment as a very important factor in people's education. the
Keep talking. It's not clear.
what's not clear?
You have to speak louder.
Okay. Can you hear me all right?
The sound quality is a bit there is echo, so I don't know if it's because of how far or close you are to the microphone or if it's a connection issue. Maybe if sometimes straightening the computer or putting the mic the sound outlets in a direct line from you could just help a little bit.
Yeah. All right. My view is on one screen and the microphone's on the other screen, so
That's what I felt. We had to interpret for the past 2 years using microphones and platforms, and it's been really something that if we really want the message to get across, probably if you can be a bit closer, that's probably better. Thank you.
Maybe you could get the microphone in the bag.
We'll find out if they can hear you better from talking with that one.
Can you hear me better this way?
Let's try again. Just.
Yeah.
I don't know how they do this.
It's in the bag. I'll just hook up a microphone quickly. Try this into the microphone slot. Can you see?
Yeah, but we gotta change microphone.
Seems to be on. Can you hear me now?
I think that's much better. I think this is better. Yeah.
They can hear you much better. So I think it's better. Can you just talk?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we could hear you in the beginning, but there was some echo. So let's see if we can try a little bit, just to listen more, and that could tell us if it is better than what it is.
It's because you're talking this way.
Okay, I'll move back a bit and talk this way into the computer. How about now? Is it better?
Sorry, I think it is now better. I think the echo is a little bit less. Does anybody have the same problem, or is it only me at my end, right? We felt that there was something about the sound quality.
All of us, I think. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, so let's try again.
So I was saying about geography, I have taught in the United States for many years, and that's how I met Jemima, as she said, and it was a memorable time teaching her studio, which was a very talented, bright studio of people. And since then, I moved around, and my last 10 years have been at Temple University, where my wife is. So I was wondering if we just go straight into the work, and I'll tell you what I've been doing. Will that be all right?
Yes, that's perfect. I might, Dennis, if I recognize certain terms or anything like that, I'll type them in the chat box. So don't be distracted by what I type. I'll just be picking up a few words like Russia as well. Mm-hmm.
I'll just open the PowerPoint. You have to help me.
Yeah.
I really would like you to plug that into this.
Yes, I can. Okay, so you want
Into that long.
Yes, I know.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Can you see the image?
Not yet, Bashar.
Sure.
No.
Hold on.
Okay.
And that's okay. How's this? Can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just starting with great examples of architecture with light, because I have always said, and as Louis Kahn said, architecture is light. This is a mosque in Bangladesh, part of a great national assembly designed by Louis Kahn. Kahn maintained that light shapes our environment. And he once said, in order to understand how dark a space is, you need just enough light to show the dark. And I found that quite enlightening. There's another shot of the mosque, the exterior of the mosque in Bangladesh. This was a complex built when Bangladesh became independent in the early 70s. Here's Khan's. Khan was a Philadelphia architect, so we all pay a lot of attention to his work. This is the Kimball Museum in Fort Worth, in Texas. You see the light is shaping the space. He designed these reflectors to wash the light around the barrel vault. This is closer to you. This is the Great Louvre Museum by Jean Nouvel. I think you must know it because it's in Abu Dhabi. And it's pretty new, but I think it's one of the greatest things to happen in UAE. Quite a magnificent double dome which filters light through, and the museum is approached by water. It's all about keeping cool and allowing the breezes to move into the museum. This is a famous La Tourette convent in France by the Corbusier. And of course, my reference is always the natural environment, the redwood forests of California. It's like walking into a cathedral. Now, I've often thought that architecture is to be found in the landscape, that all the attributes of great architecture are found in the landscape. And so I use these with students too. This is a site in the southwest of this country, in New Mexico. It's called the Tent Rocks site. It's a great cavern, which interestingly is very similar to the one that you have in Petra. This is Petra. So great spaces are made if you just look for them. They're made by nature. And so I start the students off by drawing, because I am saying that drawing and making are intrinsic to creative work. And I've said to them, you should not be drawing things. That is, don't draw figures to start with. This mark the paper and use the repetitive mark. So these are 40 by 60 sketchpad drawings on the first day of class, where I've asked them to pay attention to the geometry of the paper, and pay attention to the movement of the line across the paper, so that you can see here the geometry is recognized by the diagonals. Also to observe that the darker, the darker the mark, the brighter the white of the paper is. So I call it activating the white space of the paper, so that space is read deep into the paper. So you're actually reading depth into a flat drawing. You have to bear with me because all this mounts up to a philosophy, I guess. These are the kinds of forests we are working in. This is a part of a great urban park in Philadelphia. It's close by to us, and I put students into this forest to actually measure it and record the way they measure. And I'll show you why I do this. This is a sketch by a student who is actually carving out the space of a site in the forest, and using a repetitive mark and not drawing trees and things, but rather drawing the forest. So in this particular sketch, we have here a pathway, a threshold entry, space inside, we have boundaries and edges and light and space, which are all the things that we know about architecture. This is a plan view of the dark forest. I allow them to also do a kind of a contour line drawing of to find the structures of the way the forest is. So you can see the forest is not a bunch of trees. It's actually a forest, which is its own structure, its own space and light. This was done by a student who was trying to draw grasses from the outside and drawing in those things. And I said to her, put your head inside and draw what you see. And this is what she came up with. So here we are dealing with light and space.
Can I ask a question, maybe, Dennis, so that we can follow because of the sound quality? So what you're saying is that these are students' impressions of the forest that you showed, or anything in general? Because I just want to make sure that we're following exactly what you're saying.
So I'm sorry about the sound. I send the students into the forest to try to seek out their light and space properties, which are architectural ones. And I said this particular one has a pathway and a threshold and spaces within the site that they've chosen. It has boundaries and edges like architecture. Does that make it clearer?
Yes, yes.
And this one is a plan view. Students have never encountered orthographic drawing, but I encourage them to invent one just by looking at the site. They also go about triangulating the site, and I'll show you how they do that. It's about structures in the forest and about light in tall grasses. So I hope that's clearer.
Yeah.
Then I asked students to use very simple manila folders to use a repetitive mark, in this case, a chevron, to seek out the measurements and rhythms of the site. The site has been measured at this point, but I put this in here to show that landscape has within it rhythms that we could find in architecture. We also look at detail, that is detail of plants growing. Growth and change are intrinsic to natural environments. This is a reflective drawing, water in front and forest behind. You see, there are not drawings of group of trees added together. This is a forest with its own reflection. Again, I try to make them see right through the ground so that we are drawing many layers of sectional cuts that we put through the site. We put them one over the other so we start to read in depth, space in depth. So these are all measured drawings which bear the qualities of the spaces that are observed. The piece at the bottom is a plan, and we have multiple sections in the upper drawing. So this is my method for measuring. You can imagine a slope, and those are contour lines. These here are contour lines. And I've said, put a number of sectional cuts through the land and find a way of triangulating that. So what we did was use the eye, no tapes, no measuring tools, use the eye and the body to measure. So the first thing they do is to find out by lying down that the eye height is actually 2 paces that you make by your feet. So if you stride along a road, you'll make a pace of just under a meter, quite a lot under a meter. But I asked them to practice using the same pace for their eye height as they are to pace the ground. So they pace along the hypotenuse, and with Pythagoras they calculate the distance from the eye to the point, and then do it again and again and again and again, and they get this ability to make points in space like that. And putting several of them together, you are able to draw contour lines. Now, this is not just about measurement. As you can see, without instruments, the body is measuring. So you'll remember the measurement.
Dennis, I'm gonna just pause the English part a bit to give a bit of an idea in Arabic as well. Perhaps that's a concept that's new to some. If I can take a minute. So يعني المبدأ اللي عم بيوصله دينيس إنه طريقة القياس يعني عم بيعود الطلاب إنه يكونوا عم بيستخدموا عيونهم وأضلاعهم خاصة الذراع لحتى تنقاس مقاسات معينة، بس بطريقة كمان بتصحي قدرة الإنسان على تقدير المقاسات بطريقة ما يعتمد فيها على هي أنا عم زيد يعني طريقة تعبير، بس المبدأ هو إنه كيف نستخدم جسدنا والميزات اللي موجودة عنا لحتى نقدر نتفاعل مع الطبيعة بإنه نقيس نحن الطبيعة بالأجزاء اللي نحن عنا إياها بجسمنا، فبيزيد الوعي.
يعني بهيك حالة جمانة احنا عم نحدد عمق المكان كمان. انت عم بتشوفي الابعاد لاهداف التصميم المعماري، انه شو بتقدري تعملي لحتى تشكلي هالرؤية عندك كمهندسة او كإنسان عم يتعامل مع مكان في أبعاد، لأنه كأني حسيت من الحديث عن الظلال والتحديد الحدود تبع المكان اللي نحن عم نفكر فيه، إنه كيف هذا بيشكل جزء من فكرة التصميم. بس بدي أفهم إذا أنا فهمت اللي لازم، يعني اللي المقصود بهيك حالة. أوكي بس خلص.
I say the most important thing about this is not the measurement itself, but the memory of it. So if you're walking up a steep slope, you'll remember it. And so it's intrinsically with you when you go back to your desk to work. Instead of being given measurements, we experience them. This is a fundamental property of what is a philosophy known as phenomenology, which is defined by Merleau-Ponty, the famous philosopher, in terms of perception. Perception involves experience. Each one of us constructs one's own environment. You can think of being told what something is. If you don't experience it, you don't have it. So I put the students into this experience, and this experience is taken right through the 2-semester course. We do that with everything. We put the student right in the middle of the experience. So perception is learned through action. Is that a difficult one to say in English? I don't know. You need to translate that or? So this is my method for them. These are sectional cuts through the hill. This is just to adjust the beginning points to a 0, but here are the eye heights repeated up the slope, and where they hit the slope is a point. So you start with the vertical measurement and you get a point. If you lay the section lines down this way, you can drop that point to the section line. And then the next section line, you can drop the point there. And this is the way you construct the contour map. This is all done without any measurement tools, just the body. Now, this is a bit complicated, but it was a fun drawing to make. You see the pathway. Having made the contours, you can put a pathway into it and draw that pathway. So I had this student draw the pathway like that across the contours, and then at each pace, here's the pathway here. At each pace, which would be about just the pace size that the student chose. I had them draw section lines at right angles to the path, and then draw the section through the land and lie it down.
يعني كلهم بيجوا بيشاركوا ما شاء الله يعني.
اسلام بليز ممكن تحطي الشاشة على الميوت لأنه عم يتدخل بالصوت لو سمحتي. Thank you.
Was I not clear?
No, sorry. There was interference, so I was asking one of the students to put her screen on mute so that we can hear you. Thank you. Sorry about the interruption.
Yeah, okay. So it makes a fascinating, fun drawing to make, that you're reading plan and section on the same drawing. And we use this, it's a handmade drawing done with a pencil, very carefully plotted out. And you get a feeling for the pathway and the movement of the land. So we took those sections that we just constructed and we modeled this one with Rhinoceros, which is a digital imaging software. And we took out a lot of the sections to avoid too much complexity and built this model of the land as seen by the sections that were measured. And we also cut this in cardboard, so we have a physical as well as digital model. So here's the digital work begins with the measurement, triangulated measurement of the site. These are the section lines, and this part here is what we call meshing, and that is the form of the land. And here's the pathway, which is, you can see, plotted down through. So I have to ask you a question: are you working digitally in your studios, or by hand, or both? Or I'm not sure how deeply to go into this.
I'm gonna maybe ask if are there any of you who are studying architecture, and if you can maybe give Dennis an idea إذا في حدا منكم عم بيدرس عمارة إنه يعطي دينيس فكرة على يعني كيف شو الأدوات اللي عم تستعملوها لحتى يعرف إنه يتعمق بموضوع التضاريس وبناءه، ولا فمين منكم عم بيدرس عمارة؟ Dennis, I just I'm calling out on anyone who's studying architecture to maybe give a bit of an idea.
So we have three. We have Reem, Ribal, and Tasneem. So whoever, I mean, and Shaima. All right, that's good. Who do you? I mean, shall we start with Reem? Say that أولاً, ladies first. تفضلي ريم.
Hi, good evening. I'm studying architecture and I'm on the 5th year. I'm a graduate student. We really focus on topography and contour lines and analysis based on the land itself, because we are in the Jordan. There's a lot of topography, you know.
Yes.
And we use a software to expand these lines like SketchUp and Rivet.
You're familiar with this program called Rhinoceros?
في برنامج اسمه Rhinoceros ريم، تعرفيه؟
Yes, we talked course about, but we usually not used because it's not really popular in Jordan.
Well, we use it a lot in this program because it is so useful for imagining and representing 3 dimensions. So you'll find it all the way through my program. That's why I asked you about if you have some familiarity with it. So,
thank you, Reem. Ribal, would you like to say something?
Yeah, hello everyone. I can talk about myself. I'm using Rhinoceros since I have studied the bachelor's degree, and even we were doing as well a manual drawing, and even now as I am working as an architect, also I'm using both manual drawing and Rhinoceros.
that's excellent.
Yeah.
Ribal is the student I sent you a link to his portfolio. Dennis. Yeah, this is
in Germany.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Yes, I am in Germany. I'm studying computational design, which is focusing on Grasshopper, the programming part of Rhinoceros and Python.
Wow. So you're all over the world today.
Yes.
Yeah, kind of.
The nature of being a displaced person.
Yes. done.
اوكي في حدا تاني عنده ملاحظة، وإذا بده مساعدة بالترجمة ممكن نترجم السؤال، وإذا لا we will move on, so I don't want to delay the process. بس عم بسأل إذا حدا عنده سؤال بيحب يسأله. And maybe I don't know if this is part of the, but I'm just asking as a lay person, because you mentioned the importance of the personal experience in perceiving spaces. Is it different when you look through a lens? I mean, does the whole thing, because now everybody's moving to computational processes and to the use of computer and the use of, I mean, because what you perceive personally with your own eye is not something that you can always see in a picture or in an image using a lens of a camera or a phone or whatever. So I don't know if that's relevant to begin with, and if it's not, please don't stop. And not necessarily the answer would probably be later on if you want, but it just occurred to me as a person from totally outside this business.
I don't know that you do see the same thing through a lens, but it's the only thing that we have, isn't it? We either have our eyes or we have an instrument to see and measure. I'm not quite sure how to answer the question. What do you think, Simona?
يعني سؤالي كان للطلاب انه في فرق بين لما هالتجربه اللي هو عم يحكي لكم عنها، انه تشوفوا المكان بعينكم، تتصوروه، تقيسوه باعضائكم مثل ما شرحت لنا جمانة، وبين لما بنستخدم عدسه لنشوف المكان، لو نتصوره لنضيف له بعد الديمومه، انه قد ما تذكرنا بس نحن يمكن احيانا بحاجه لشيء نرتكز عليه. انه في اختلاف بين المكان كما نتصوره بالتجربة الشخصية ومثل ما بنشوفه مثل ما بنشوفه بالضرورة عن طريق عدسة. فجمانة حتشوف إذا بتقدر تجاوبنا.
Dennis, I'm gonna actually ask, I don't know, Maher, are you here? Because it would be added value if you can speak about space, not from the perspective of the eye, but from the perspective of the body. But I'll also, before Maher, if you'd like to share, I'm gonna share that the experience, I'm gonna share one instance and I'll maybe translate it to Arabic afterwards. Dennis, I'll share an exhibition that an Iraqi artist produced here in Dubai. He was representing, and it answers this conversation, he was representing an experience of an immigrant from Iraq, or a refugee, sorry, from Iraq, who was trying to leave Iraq to a European country. And that European country was requiring of him to describe the village he's from. And he was someone who knew the village inside out experientially, but not in measurements and not from an above perspective, a bird's eye view perspective. And so he kept on describing the village, and he would fail the exam to go into this refugee process. And so someone from Iraq, from another village, told him, the people who are listening to you are people who saw the village from a map, and have never stepped foot in this village. And so when they ask you about the village, they think you don't know it because you are not describing what they know on paper. And so they're making you fail the exam to move you as a refugee to that country. So what you need to do is you need to memorize about the village, but not from a bodily experience, from a map experience. So turning the three-dimensional experience to a flat experience. And so when he did that, he was accepted as a refugee to that country, because now he was speaking their language, which is a two-dimensional, digital, flat, not necessarily digital, but just a flat experience. So that speaks a lot to this distinction.
That's very good.
But if Maher in particular is someone who understands space through body in a daily manner. So Maher, if you have something to add, if you'd like to add something.
Yes, thank you for that. Well, if I would talk about how I consider like buildings and blocks around me, and how I measure space, well, I take it with my body, and I always touch the thing that I, for example, interact with. And for someone who does not use his eyes, and so I move with firstly hands, and then I move to see how my body, like by walking, I mean, how my body is feeling those walls and buildings. Why? Because as we all know, when we close our eyes, we feel the existence of something by maybe the pressure on our skin even before we touch that thing. So in one of the villages that I used to live in Lebanon, I used to walk between the blocks and measure maybe by how my body is like feeling comfortable with this space by walking. And yeah, and I might after attending this session, I might get like more interested in observing and maybe developing new methods for that. But as Rasha said, I'm a person like out of this business. But to me, from my personal experience, this is what I wanted to say.
Thank you. That's excellent. That's a very good example. I find that many architecture studios, students are simply given site measurements and told to work on them. But that doesn't bring you anywhere. Just gives you some objective data which you don't know about. So I think these points are very clear that you're all making. So this slide here shows my instructions at the top. I had to measure a difficult rock with a plumb bob and triangulate it. I'll show you some slides of students doing that. The bottom one is a rhino drawing of that rock. Not too clear, but here are students actually triangulating the rock with strings, and they get all mixed up and so on. But you can see that they're going to remember that. That becomes part of measurement, is to remember the experience of it. We embarked upon some interesting models, which is to, in this one, a layered presentation of the topography, which goes across the contour, not with the contour. And so we're able to see the formation of the land. There's some more this we call the pixelated model. We took a whole lot of square dowels and pushed them and pulled them to conform to the measurements of the site. The reason for doing this is so that you have a physical way of manipulating something. And then we also did it with layers, that is laminates, to get the form of the land. But this produced some interesting architecture. We accidentally found that we're actually making some architecture here. So we got some very beautiful results from experimenting this way. I wanted to draw your attention to the famous Piero della Francesca. Those of you who work technically know what a point cloud is. And he, in 1460, I think, 1450, Piero, the famous artist and mathematician, invented a way of drawing perspective by cutting the head into many slices, like you see many layers, and plotting these layers according to a known geometry, so that he actually had a way of plotting Cartesian coordinates for each point, which is the origin of what we use today in medical imaging and 3D printing, and all digital modeling comes from this mathematics of Piero. He used this famously in a painting which he called the flagellation. But we won't go into that, but I just wanted to put it here to say how amazing this mathematician was, this artist mathematician was in 1450 to come up with a system which we still use today. And here's another mathematician, a Russian, who in 1934 developed a way of triangulating form. He developed the algorithms for this triangulation system. And if I had the ability here, I would show you that the model is three-dimensional. You can turn it around and actually build a three-dimensional form through triangulating. This is what we call meshing today in 3D modeling. And we've used it quite a lot in our calculations. What's important about it is that 1934, the origin of this triangulating system is now used everywhere for everything. It's the most common way we describe 3D surfaces, like this. This is done in Rhino. And I always find this interesting that when I ask students to do that literally on the site, to experience what triangulation is all about, they came up with some rather fascinating things. Over here we have a computer model of a site. These are just instructions of how to do it. This one is actually a model made with wood sticks, like this one. So we're doing both manual and computer graphic work. I asked them to do site analysis because we're learning at this point about Photoshop, and I asked them to combine Photoshop drawings with their own drawings, you can see, and do a site analysis. So these are large scale sections. I think these drawings are about 2 meters long, big ones. And here we have multiple cuts through a site. On the left here, you see all the sections of the rock face being put one on top of the other, and then manipulated in Rhino. This is where it becomes very interesting. We investigated stereotomy. Now, is that an Arabic word for stereometric drawings?
I'm not familiar Rasha, maybe you can.
What is it? What is it? I you know, if you write it, Jamal,
Stereometric.
Stereometric.
من قال لا أدري فقد أفتى. I'll research it. So
I guess there is no translation for this word, but is it like the system of stones that work in arcs and beams? It's the use of stones by descriptive geometry. Yeah, 3D geometry, descriptive geometry.
Yes, you're right. So it is a very technical term. Well, we make them easily with Rhino, but this is a hand drawing here on the left. But the model on the right is of great interest to me. I asked the students to take a piece of manila folder and develop a module which they could use repetitively. This is quite a complex model, which initially we were having trouble modeling in Rhino, but we eventually found a way of doing it. The way to do this model was to use no glue at all, except you could use glue with the sticks, but initially the student had a layer of modules hooked together, and then I asked her to put sticks in them so she could bend the model any way she wanted to. And so the form of the model came about through forming it, not with a preconceived idea of what the model was going to be. This was an experiment with a double system of sticks and cardboard, so she could twist it and turn it any way she wanted. My premise here is that architecture must also have evidence of the way it forms itself. Now that's a very difficult one, but this actually literally deals with the formation in progress. Here's one of those blankets of repetitive units with no glue whatsoever. And we, in some cases, used a double system, uniform grid and the repetitive units, and we scaled it to the human being so that somebody can walk through this construction and experience light and space.
Dennis, can you pause here just to the previous one? I just want to say the same thing in Arabic, but it's a huge transition from documenting now to space.
Yeah. So we are doing design at this point.
فبهالنقطة وخاصة إنه المجموعة الأكبر يمكن ما نكون دارسين عمارة، يعني كل اللي شدناه أول هو فهم الطبيعة وفهم المقاسات وفهم طريقة تعامل الجسد مع اللي حوله، ورسومات على الواقع اللي موجود إن كان بالغابة ولا غيره. هلأ عم تتاخذ هالمعلومات وعم تتحول لخطوط بلشت يعني تتوسع لحجم يقدر يحوي الإنسان. فبدل ما يكون الواحد فقط عم بيرسم اللي حوله، هلأ عم بيحول طريقة تفكير معينة وطريقة تخطيط معينة تصير الإنسان يقدر يعني يعيش جواتها. فهالصورة هي بتبين كأنه مثلا صخرة، بس هي في مساحات جوا للمعيشة. Please go ahead, Dennis. Yeah.
So this is the same project where the student is using two systems. As Jemina reminded me, we're now into a design phase where we've asked students to scale their figures down into occupiable space. These were experiments with which we had started with manipulating the landscape. This student took a plane of wood and a dowel system and started to push one through the other. And that action of carving out the space is evident in the way you pull and push these planes and dowels, so that there's another shot of, so that you can actually shape space by pulling and pushing the dowel. We're making architecture at this point, drawing on our experiences with the topographical models. So this is the last slide of the first part, and we're already 1 hour, and I'm wondering if I should stop or what. What do you think?
No, it's perfect, Dennis. Maybe we can pause, Rasha and Bashar. I'm assuming we can go on for a while, a bit longer, but I'm going to suggest anyway to pause a bit to hear from a few of the attendees for you to get a sense of what's being picked up or any questions, and then
maybe if we can try, Jumana, to translate, just side translate this last slide. It kind of puts into perspective what they have seen. I mean, I can try some and ask you about some words if I could. Okay, so I mean, if I can ask, I'm going to try to translate this last slide into Arabic as a side translation, and I will seek help from Jumana if something was too technical for my layperson's experience. So بداية التصميم في العمارة الذي وصفناه هنا وفي العديد من المناهج الدراسية يوجه الطالب لإعادة التفكير في الطرق التي تعلمها عن رؤية العالم، ويحاول أن يضع في النفوس يعني طريقة لتقييم البيئة ولإيجاد الإلهام في عملية الاكتشاف عن طريق التعامل مع الطبيعة بهالطريقة. فبالتالي عملية التصميم الميكينج in that sense is تصميم جمانة and making يعني فعل الخلق بهذه الحالة يعني الإنجاز يعني. فالرسم والتصميم هما في صلب فصل المصمم عن التجربة لكي يستطيع أن يمضي في تحقيق فكرة معينة في ذهنه. ويعني ذلك أن كل طالب يلاحظ من تجربته الشخصية شيء معين، وبالتالي فإن الطالب أو الطالبة يصبح على علم بفكرة التكوين خلال هذه العملية. في كل دراسات التصميم المعمارية المشارك سيكون مركزي، يعني سيركز نفسه في المكان، سيكون على علم بالآخرين الذين يشغلون هذا المكان. طبيعة هذه الأماكن المعمارية أو الحيز المعماري يمكن أن تفهم من خلال العمل كمسار، كمكان، كحيز أو كمناسبة. وبالتالي فإن الحدود والهوامش، حدود وهوامش الأمكنة التي يشغلها الإنسان لن تكون will not initially assume pre-established envelopes، لن تفترض مسبقا تغليفات معينة للمكان أو نظرة معينة للمكان، ولكن هي مسألة نستقيها مباشرة من العمل الذي نقوم به في هذا المكان والضوء بما في ذلك الضوء الذي نراه في تلك الأمكنة التي نشغلها. الحيز المعماري يمكن أن نراه باعتباره وحدة مكونة حسب مقوماتها الداخلية. ما بعرف إذا هذا مزبوط، وهذا ما قاله بول كلي في كتاباته عن التشكيل والشكل. في شيء مفهوم أنا من اللي قلته جمانة؟ مفروض يكون في شيء بيفهموه الناس؟ أوكي. لا
هو
يعني
بس خليني يمكن بقى انه هلا بما انك ترجمتي نصها
تفضل. Yeah.
بس Dennis, what I'm trying to do now is Risha translated verbatim, and I'm just going to give the idea more experientially in Arabic as well, to emphasize what you spoke about. فالفكرة الرئيسية اللي دينيس بيدرب عليها بتدريسه إنه نقيم، يعني يكون الواحد عم بيمر بتجربة تفصله عن الشيء اللي متوقع. يعني نحن كلنا مخزن بدماغنا كيف المكان لازم يكون، فبالتالي كمصممين أو كمفكرين نرجع دائما على المعهود. بس كيف الواحد بيطلع من المعهود هو إنه يرجع يعيد تجربته من الصفر لحتى يقدر ينشئ من جديد. فالفكر ببلش من جديد لأنه الحواس عم ترجع تتفاعل بطريقة مثل كأنه بتتحدى المعهود، ومنه بينشأ هندسة تقدر تكون يمكن متناغمة أكثر أو ما أنا مأخوذة من مكان لتقع في مكان آخر ما بيناسبها، أو يعني فعملية تفكيك للفكر لحتى يرجع يقدر ينهض بفكر جديد تابع للمكان بحد ذاته.
So I have the second part and a second file. I can close this one and open the second part if you like.
Yes, but I do suggest that maybe for 5 minutes, if we, Denis, if you hear from a few that are present, either questions or a few comments, so that you can get a sense of who's present beside the few who have already spoken.
Okay.
في حدا يعني بيكون كتير فعال، خاصة إنه هلا دينيس بيحكي بالجزء الثاني. إذا حدا عبر عن اللي انحكى بالجزء الأول بحيث إنه إن كان بسؤال ولا بتفاعل مع المضمون، لحتى ما يكون عم بيحكي بالهوا، لأنه ما عنده أي فكرة مين أنتوا، وهو بالعادة بيحكي مع طلاب عمارة وأنتوا أغلبيتكم ما نكون طلاب عمارة. بقى كمان كتير مهم الواحد يشوف شو اللي لقطوه أو شو الأسئلة اللي عندكم إياها. فإذا أي حدا بيحب يحكي بالعربي ونحن نترجم أو يحكي دايركتلي بالإنجليزي بيكون ممتاز، وهالشي بيساعد للجزء الثاني يكون بيصب على اللي أنتوا محتاجين له أكتر كمان.
Well, I have a question, but maybe I'm trying to delay it a bit because I still expect Denis will be talking about this. So just to avoid letting him repeating things. Is that fine?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think in the next part you'll see that it's connected very much to the first part, in that we now go into putting the body into space and examining the experience of space, not only through visual means, but also through measurement. So I find this part extremely interesting. And I'd like to just carry on with it, and you could catch up with the question maybe at that point. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I had to stop sharing.
في حدا تاني بحب يشارك؟
Excellent.
Yes, I'm going to do that.
No? Dennis, there's Ala who's written in Arabic. I'm just gonna translate. It's her first time to attend anything to do with design, and she's taken by this field and likes to read about it, and is very appreciative of the steps that you're explaining in a way that has allowed her to see how you reach a point through a process utilizing human sort of faculties. I'm sorry, I don't usually do such quick translations, but and that this process basically has given a lot of creativity and value to the end result. So in appreciation, this is Ala writing. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Shimana.
Yeah. And anyone from the architects who has a question or wants to share, architects or not, إذا في حدا بيحب يحكي يعني هيك بيقدر كمان يعرف شخصياتكم أكثر والمكان اللي أنتم جايين منه واهتمام. تفضل.
I can share some thoughts. There is a quote, it says, one photo worth 1,000 words. So yeah, it was very nice to see some sketches and photos in these slides. And also some sketches of the students reminded me of the process that artist Jackson Pollock he used before to translate the rhythm and nature into spectacular painting. And yes, and there is also a book that I sent the address, the title of this book in the chat, which is The Eye of the Skin. It's by Johann Balasma.
Could you say the title again?
The Eye of the Skin by Johann Balasma. Yeah, it's a very popular.
Yeah, thank you. Any more questions or comments?
Sometimes because it's a new area, Dennis, it just takes each of us time to process, I guess.
I guess Reem Al-Hamad need to add something, yeah.
I want to ask for you, what's the better for design? Is it sketches or physical model or software?
Sketches or software, which is better for design?
You see, we like to work with both. So I would say the hand and the eye are the most important. The software is a tool, and you have to use the tool as a tool. But with the hand and the eye, you can think. And drawing then becomes thinking. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
So, any more? So let's get on with the second part, because there's a lot of fun in the second part. Are you on slideshow?
Yes.
Let's see. So here's a fun project which has to do, you see, by this time of the year we're in winter and the students cannot be outside. So I love this movie by Akira Kurosawa, the Japanese very famous Japanese director who did an autobiographical film about himself. And this particular one is a dream. It's called Dreams. It's a dream about himself as an 8-year-old boy being told not to go into the forest when the rain is coming down with sunshine behind it. So he, being an 8-year-old boy, he goes into the forest and he witnesses the marriage of the fox gods. And the story is very wonderful in many ways, very tragic in others. Important for us, though, is to study the movement. So we study the actual movement in the film, and then we study perceived movement through static things like the grass waves and the breeze, the rain comes down, the light moves. So we get things growing. We have people moving. We have a mist in front of the procession of fox gods, and all the time we're also watching a little boy from behind, and he's peeking through behind some tall trees. This is not working.
Maybe it's too big.
Right. So there are 3 ways in which the students have recreated this film. The one is with a Photoshop drawing, taking snips and redrawing from the film itself. And you can see the procession moving through the forest. And here's the little boy sneaking behind the trees. There's another one. This one was done amazingly on an iPhone with a cursor. And we enlarged this image to something like 2 meters, and it was still in very good condition. And this is a digital drawing now done by hand. This one is a completely hand drawing using Prismacolor pencil. So we had fun with that because it brings us back to the forest. It brings us back to the experience of the forest. What these slides don't show well is that the mist is preceding the procession and actually carving a space through the forest as it moves. It's quite a brilliant person, Akira Kurosawa. So this is the fun project, which is we select a stair within the campus and measure it up in conventional ways, but I have them draw it by hand, and I have them draw all the regulating lines along with the finished product, so we can see where the finished product came from. Then I ask them to experience the stair and put themselves into the space of the stair and find the space of their bodies within the stair. So now we're experiencing movement and describing the action. We do what we call contact drawings. That is, the stair only comes alive when you touch it. So I have them draw action drawings of grabbing the handrail, and then the handrail is drawn for what it is. But over here, it fades away because the action is here. We're learning still about orthographic projection. So it makes sense to draw this orthographically. And you can see the hand is accentuated where it grabs the handrail. This thing. Action of feet on the treads. This may seem a bit strange to you, but bear with me and I'll show you where it's leading. You have to remember these are beginning students, aged 18 or 19 years old. But and some of them say, I can't draw, but as long as they can visualize and see what they're visualizing, they can draw it. I'd like to take you through two sketches by the famous Alvarado. He went traveling in Europe, and this is like, not Europe, this is Morocco. He went traveling away from Finland, which is just forest. He found a fascination with what he called the rising town. And I'll show you that in a minute. But I'd just like to ask you to enter this drawing as he was drawing it. That is, you're asked to enter it with your eye and take this pathway into the landscape and take the pathway through the landscape. And while you're doing this, you're constructing the landscape. So we have a three-part mountain here being constructed through the wandering pathway. This puts a person into the drawing. This one is similar. It starts with a pathway, and the pathway starts to build the contour, which then builds the three-dimensional town and the mountain. This is in Sicily. So these are important for us because it shows the participation of the body as a builder. These are historic drawings by Veronese on the left and Rubens on the right. We call this a progressive narrative in that the story is told about something in many drawings in the same page. But what it also does is it gives a sense of movement of the figures, and as we tried all in the beginning of this program, it activates the space of the white paper. I put this in because it's a famous drawing by Paul Klee, the famous Bauhaus artist, who insisted that form means nothing without the process of making it. So we are in the process of witnessing the swinging pendulum here, but what we're looking at is actually the movement that was made by the pendulum and not the pendulum itself. These points represent where the pendulum came from, but we have a drawing of action here only. This painting is in Philadelphia. It's Duchamp, nude standing stare, derived from both Cubist and Futurist movements in the early part of the 20th century. I put these in because they become the basis for what we're doing. And so does this drawing. This is a picture of Duchamp himself walking down the stair. And you see how his body is filling the space of his movement. Then my other reference is another Bauhaus artist, Oscar Schlemmer. He called this a stick dance. He extended the limbs of the body into space so that the extensions could start to mark extremities of the envelope of the stage. I used this as a basis for a project on the stair. And so we put students on the stair to experience the stair, as I showed you, and then fill the space of their movement in a montage of this kind. So the space that they have made actually has physical character. It's a great mystery to students when you say to them, say architectural space. It means nothing until you can do something like this. That is, we made a choreography, and the student dancer would move according to the choreography up the stairs or down the stairs, and fill the space with her own movement. We start with, basic impressionist sketches of this, and you see that this is like a progressive narrative that I showed you. They get the sense of the space being filled by the body. This is an attempt much earlier on at another university, but to find the envelope of the space that you made with your body. There's a plan up there, and this elevation describes what we can now do in a computer very easily, but done by hand. To get an idea of three-dimensional coordinates, that is the beginning of understanding what a point cloud is, I had them find a corner in a room and make a neutral grid and start to pull those points in and out. So we have three-dimensional coordinates in space, which can be measured against these two flat planes. So, that establishes three XYZ coordinates for each point in space. That's the beginning of making a point cloud, which is the way we measured the actions of this body in space. This girl has extensions to her limbs like the Oscar Schlemmer figure, but she's measuring the way she's moving by extending the extensions towards points like these or like these. What we have here is a perspectival movie. This was done with two iPhones, one behind and one on the side. And then we convert these by pulling them into orthographic images in Photoshop, which you can do pretty easily by distorting the perspective into a flat plane. So here we are having a lot of fun with this, filling the space with the movement of the body and the extensions of the body. So we now have a full volume of movement, which is the space. And this is the point cloud that came out of such a thing. We got this by using film editing tools and color-coded each point. So if you go back here, you'll see that we use green because that's the standard way of picking something out in a color photo, to measure these points and to measure the body. And it's very complicated. So we had to edit a lot of them out just to get a good cloud. So we have elevation from behind and the side elevation here. This one is more literal. This is a hand drawing with all the points. This is before we used the computer. And all these points were measured as three-dimensional points to the floor and to the wall behind. So getting back to the movie, the same thing can be done in film editing, where you can find all these points and plot them as XYZ points in space. Sometimes students have used overhead views as well, but only two views are required to get three-dimensional coordinates. This is also a drawing that required some design, which is that this body is moving, and then the action is condensed here. And so it's a design drawing as well. This drawing could be clearer on the image, but it's a rhino drawing of exactly what you saw. And you can see that movement is drawn of the. So when you take a stick and you wave it through the air, it's a path of movement, and that's what's being drawn here. This is another drawing with all these points being measured. These are unmeasurable because we didn't have expensive animation software. We just use the iPhone. That's all. So all these motions from one point to another are actually done by eye, and then we measure what we did by eye. So it's a kind of a backwards process of measurement. This is an elevation of a body moving up the stair, and this is the plan that we have. So it gets interesting now because we have this complex volume of space made by a figure. And I said, okay, now let's empty out the space. So what we get is a tube of space like this. And I said, make 30 controlled sections through here and interpolate in between so that these sections of which are represented by cardboard are actually interpolations of these controlling sections. Then that's what happens. We are moving through space and now emptying the space out, and what we have is the landscape of the envelope measured accurately. And this produces some wonderful things like the interior of such a study, which is purely architecture. So we have an internal landscape of many sections. This is before we used the computer, and these are 150 sections drawn in oblique projection, both the back and the front of the model that's been cut in two. It took forever, as you can imagine, to make these drawings. And this is another hand drawing. You see, a typical section is like that, and we simply pile them one on top of the other. Now these are all measured so that they come from the point cloud that we made by film editing. We use Rhino to make these wire models, So we can see right through them. And the student is experimenting with manipulating the model itself. So the landform, at least the form of the movement on the stair has become a very architectural element. Rhino is very good in that you can rotate these all around. You can take some of the model out and manipulate it in that way. This is also before we use the computer. Using that plane and dowel system of pushing and pulling to craft a space. And you'll see here the side wall of that landscape created by the movement of the figure. I said they could use pieces of it. Here's the other half over here. And they were into a design problem here involving the movement of a human being to scale. So a human being in this case would be about this high. And so in many of the drawings, we drew views of the interior. This is a fascinating experiment which comes from manipulating a grid. Paul Clay showed us this, that he could make a neutral grid and start to push the grid around and shape it by manipulating that grid. So what's happening here is the shaping of space of the interior of the movement that you've just measured with this grid system. And this is what he came up with, layering that information one on top of the other. So the space that was measured is inside here. A section and the view to the side. You see how the memory of the space that you made with your body is now in the model itself. So there's the wall of the model made and used, because at this point you know it intimately. It's not just something you've done. At the end, we ask the students to make architectural space by manipulating the landscape of the interior of what we call a wormhole on the stair. You can see the stair here, and the space that they made with the movement of their bodies is part of the stair now. And I said use two systems, planes and dowels. So this is initially a working model, and then he started to pull the two together. We then put the figure in motion on these stairs and made stop motion movies of this figure moving in space. You'll see some of it here. These are the stop motion movies of the interior of one of these projects. We suddenly have the use of light, which is measured. It's easy to do that with Rhino. You can set the time of the day and the season, and the light will, well, you can see what's going to happen with the interior. These are stop motion, yeah. This stop motion video, we had them make stop motion walk through of their project. That project is here. Now you can see the interior is coming out of the motion that was studied through the film. I think I'm probably not explaining this too well because it requires a lot more time to go through it in detail, and I don't think we have that.
Perfect as an introduction, Dennis.
Sorry?
It's perfect as an introduction.
I enjoyed this project a lot. Suddenly we're into structures, tension and compression structure. And this student, I'll just go to what she did. You see, she took her stair and she strung it together with tension. And so she was able to twist it around and manipulate it. And this is what she came up with. The stair is now winding, and the way to keep it all together was through these tensional members. And of course, we make them draw by hand all the time. This student was fascinated with the bending of wood. You see, it's really important to make models because it involves the hand and the eye, and it's not just some abstraction through the computer. So they get into all kinds of difficulties, but the use of the curvilinear dowel was, we steam bent these to make them into the shapes we wanted. These are studies of light, sunlight, in the models that they have made. Now these, as you saw, don't come from nowhere. These are interpretations of the spaces they made with their bodies by moving up the stair. Here's the stair, here's the space made by the body. This is the actual space. We're practicing the use of Rhino to visualize light in the space. This is a stop motion through one of the models. This is an actual model, physical model. Reminded me a lot of the tent rocks illustration I had shown them. So the sunlight studies are perfect for understanding. When I was a student, we had no way of doing this. I was so impressed that we could generate an actual accurate projection of sunlight into architectural space. It's another model of the stair made with tension and compression. And stop motion through that model. The V-ray walk, it's called. V-ray is what's used to make the construction. This was interesting that he put himself into his model. The movement up the stair in the light that he found through Rhino. And here's the remnant of the landscape made by the body moving. But these are various study models. And so we're at the end, yeah. And I'm sorry it took so long. See, this is a summary of what I've said. This is Merleau-Ponty, the phenomenology perception person. Space is not the setting in which things are arranged, but the means by which the position of things becomes possible. And too often think about space.
Dennis, I'm going to try to translate this sentence for whomever's still
It's a
there.
complex sentence.
Yeah, just give me a second. Space is not setting in which إنه المساحة اللي بنعيش فيها يعني ما المساحة ليست هي التي توضع فيها الأشياء، ولكن المساحة هي الأداة التي تمكن الأشياء أن تكون يعني في المكان. يعني كتير هي فلسفة كتير عالية بقى، ما بتترجم بجملة من حدا ما بيعرف يترجم بسرعة، بس إن شاء الله تكون عم توضح الصورة. Go ahead, Dennis.
So, space is not simply made by outlining something and putting something into it. Merleau-Ponty says there's the person involved here, and spaces can only come about when somebody occupies the space. It's not just a thing. So placemaking is perceptual construction. That's what we went through earlier. Our understanding of spaces we live in is formed through this construction. In order to initiate this knowledge about the environment, each individual participates in making the cognitive environment within which to act. Is this too much complicated?
No, I'm just going to suggest maybe I'm going to take a screenshot from this slide, Dennis, and we can share it with the group, and perhaps maybe use the few minutes before it turns to the hour. If anyone has questions, or if you want to have sort of a final wrap-up thoughts beside the ones written. But maybe if you want to hear from whomever is here first, that's.
Be glad to answer the question. I'm sure there are lots of mystery about what I just said.
Yeah, but Bashar, ما بعرف do you want to encourage? I'm gonna use something I usually use when we're as a group. So instead of saying who has something to say, I'm gonna say for each person to actually express, to state something, and it doesn't need to be something highly intellectual, but I think it's important for Dennis also to conclude this session knowing who he has spoken to. So I'm going to ask each person to make one statement. حأطلب من كل شخص يعني مو بس الأشخاص اللي حابين يحكوا، يعني حشجعكم إنه دينيس عطانا وقته إنه كل شخص يحكي يا أما تعليق يا أما سؤال يا أما فقط إنه وين الشخص بأي مكان، لأنه يعني هالشي هيك بيكمل التجربة كمان لدينيس ما يكون حكى وما يعرف مع مين عم بيحكي.
I know it's hard to summarize such a lot of stuff in one question, but I would be interested. Maybe I should ask a question.
I'm trying to get them to at least voice something, even if it's just stating their location, even if they don't have a question.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to ask something, but after Jumana's translation to that sentence about what is really space, I want to reform it into a statement, because I just assume that the measuring process itself could be sometimes not only technical or designing, but even sometimes social, by maybe considering others' point of view for those who would be in interaction with this space, or by maybe engaging them by looking for their needs or how they interact. Because I'm like, I've been to Dubai recently, and I'm totally in a new city, new environment to me. And sometimes I like remembered some people who like on a wheelchair or visually impaired or something like that, who suggested if this building or this space, let me say, has been made in different way, it would be like more suitable for those people. So this is what I thought. It could be like just by considering, or more efficiently by engaging those people. Yeah, and really thank you for your
That's a very good point.
time. Yeah.
Nobody? You see, I was wondering how you react to placing students in the spaces that they're making. You see, that goes back to the first part, which I said, you have to experience space in order to know it. So I put them into difficult stairways to experience what they make, and then measure it at the same time. That completes the experience, is by measuring. If you just simply experience something, you don't have it anymore. You can sketch it, but you still don't have it until you've got some quantitative data. Anyway, so I say measurement and expression go hand in hand in architecture.
Thank you, Dennis. I'm aware that Bashar, I think you might need us to finish in about 10 minutes. Bashar.
So,
yes, and even Dennis, you are invited to join us if you have time. It is about VIP.fund and
I can't hear you, Bashar.
It's choppy, Bashar. Dennis, in 10 minutes, there's a call to many of the students of the program. So yeah. I think Bashar is noting that you're also welcome to join that. So I'm just gonna read some of what's being written. Ala is stating that she's in Lebanon. And Khadija is noting that she cannot speak because the internet is weak. So then some of the locations, one of the reasons why you're not hearing most of them speak is sometimes because the internet is quite choppy. Yes. In certain locations, but hopefully with the visual part, it also helped to pick up on the content. Because we're time limited, I'm gonna press on each one of you to at least have Dennis hear your voice with any statement, either where you are. Shukran Ala, thank you Ala for sharing, or any other comment, or something you took from the talk. Qutayba, I think you raised your hand. يمكن رفعت إيدك, or it was by mistake. Khadija, you're raising your hand.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I would like to thank Mr. Dennis. It's amazing session, really, wallah.
Khadija, it stopped. We stopped hearing you. Amazing session, and then it stopped. And Khadija is speaking from Lebanon.
Oh, wow.
Yes, yeah, I'm speaking from Lebanon. Internet is not good. It's so bad.
Yes, that's all right. Thank you. I'm glad
Yeah.
you hear your voice.
Thank you so much. It's amazing, great session.
Well, I'm glad you like it.
Manal,
Sorry. I put Jemana through. I put Joanna through some of this when I taught her. Do you remember?
Yes.
Yeah.
Manal is stating she's in Jordan.
Yeah.
So familiar with the landscape you were talking about, probably, Dennis.
Yes.
And I think Ribal, you want to say something, or I saw you raise your hand. Or
Yeah, thank you, Professor Dennis, for the nice lecture. And yeah, it might be shocking for you, but actually it was inspiring to see these models. It's between fluid forms and discrete forms at the same time. And at the moment in our university, we are tackling the challenge of circular economy and how we can design for circular economy. We need to design models that could generate architecture design from the trash material that we don't use most of the time. We just put it in the trash or we recycle it. But instead now we need to reuse the material that we have after deconstruction process.
That's good, thank you. So the process of the design should be evident in the design itself. A great architecture does this. The great examples of architecture, we see the process itself in the design.
Dennis, I'm gonna use the time. Ibrahim, you want to speak?
Yes.
I'll also afterwards read what Bashar wrote and Ali.
Yes, I'm Ibrahim Al-Hariri, academic advisor and project manager. I live in Jordan. I'm so glad to join this session, and thank you so much, Prof. Dennis, for offer us your time, effort, and for giving us any additional dimension for analysis and seeing architecture and beauty in general. Thank you so much.
You're quite welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibrahim. Bashar wrote, thank you. Architecture is the mirror on which people's cultures, renaissance, and development are reflected. Thank you, Bashar. And Ali wrote, I study medicine. So that's to give you an idea, Dennis, on also the diversity in who's listening. I study medicine, but I like the session. Thank you so much, Mr. Dennis.
You're welcome.
So we'll have to wrap up in 2-3 minutes. Naveen, Iman, anyone else? Yamama, Abdullah. I'm just reading random names, but please go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, Mr. Dennis. My name is Naveen Atwani. I live in Belarus. So when I came here 7 years ago, I saw like new ways of building things. Here, they just build 4 or 5 buildings and they connect them using bridges. So I just want to know if this criteria is used in other places, maybe in the US.
Oh no, this is students ask me, so where can I read about this? And I say, it's all in my head. So it comes from my own view of opening possibilities for beginning students, so that they're not learning by rote. And I have invented this from my own life.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Naveen, it was clear?
Well, I didn't hear well, but I think, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Did you hear, Jemima? I think she didn't.
Yes, I think Naveen was asking if the form that she's, I don't know if Naveen, were you asking if the form of the architecture that you're finding in Belarus is in other places? And
yeah, that's my question. Yeah.
Yeah, and Dennis, I understood from what you said that the process that you have shown is a process that you developed, so that process is not necessarily applied elsewhere in architecture.
No, that's correct.
I don't know, Khadija, were you about to speak or no? Okay.
I think we should probably stop now.
Yes, Kate, thank you for being there as well, and hopefully to hear also your gems someday, inshallah. Dennis, really appreciating your presence with us, and here Rama just joined as well, founder of the VIP.fund, and I know that there's a lot that they took from the visual part, and if anyone has questions, you're welcome to send them to me, and I'll forward them to Dennis if you'd like. And you brought richness, Dennis, because visual communication is not necessarily something we're always exposed to in terms of processes. And anyway, a lot to learn from today. Thank you. And yes.
Thank you for listening. And email is fine. I don't mind answering questions by email. And just to share with everyone that Dennis has had students whose families are also in Zatari in particular. So he's also been exposed and familiar to some of the context we're all part of. So I found out I have a student from Jordan who works in Kuwait, and all over the world.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dennis and Kate. Yalla.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
شكرا لك جمانة كمان، شكرا جزيلا.